All right, so today we're going to talk about it's another meeting. I'm really apologize for last week. I wasn't able to do a meeting last week, but hopefully that shouldn't be the case for today. We're going to continue our project, and I think we're almost done. I think we're around 60% done with our project, and then we'll be going right away to our new project, which is going to be a first-person game. All right, it's a first-person shooter game. So, just to give a recap of what we did last week in case you haven't joined the meeting or you didn't watch the YouTube video, but please, I highly recommend after we finish this meeting, go ahead and watch the previous video. It shouldn't be that long. It's like a 1 hour video, but you can use the timestamps attached to skip some parts. All right, so last week we talked about invoke, which is about, delaying methods inside of Unity, and we also talked about its upsides and downsides, and usually like why people don't, like developers of Unity don't really use invoke, and it's essentially because of the string references. We want to make sure as a developer, especially Unity developers, we tend to avoid, or we try to avoid from using string references, okay? And this is because that's the usual challenge. It's the most common reason to why we get bugs in our programs, and usually we want to do our best to not get bugs in our code, right? We want to make sure that we can compile our program right away and make sure we have less mistakes as possible so we can publish the game soon and, let the viewers enjoy their work. We already know that once you start delaying your work or delaying the production of your game, usually the audience, they usually maybe don't enjoy that or they just start getting bored of it and move on to another project that they're interested in, or maybe some other developers. So we want to make sure that the key idea is we want to make as less mistakes as possible and make our game, again, time sensitive. Make sure that we make the game as close as possible to our intended due date, right? And then another thing we talk about is like how to, use multiple audio clips. I think 2 classes ago we just introduced ourselves on using audio in Unity, and sadly, I know these lectures that I do, sadly somehow I'm not able to, share the audio. I'm still working on that. I'm still working on how to, fix that problem, but it's expected that once you start making your game and applying the same idea that I did from these videos, you should hopefully be able to see or hear the audio, right? But yes, in last class, I taught you guys how to use many different audios in just one scene in Unity, right? And we use code for that. We use different types of code. We also use serialized field. Um, but yes, the key idea is your game isn't as perfect or full or complete if you don't have sound, right? Sound is one of the factors that really makes the game AAA. And then after that, we talked about Boolean states. I'm not sure if we talked about this in the last project, but Boolean states are really important because usually when I talk about this, it's a good way to measure or tell the program what state you're in. Okay, so states meaning like are you in the dead state or in the alive state in the game, or if the player's alive, you want to tell the player or the not the player but the program in Unity saying that when you're alive you want to do these certain tasks and when you're not you do something else, which is like maybe game over screen or go back to the main menu in your game or just basically restart the game itself, right? And this is the most simplest way to do that. The most simplest way to actually tell the program using C# is by using Boolean states. So we set a variable which is Boolean, and Boolean is basically true or false states. So either you're dead or either you're not. And then from there, we just go on by saying if you're not alive, then you would do something. Or if you're not dead, then you do something, vice versa, right? It's the same idea here. So we talked about Boolean states. But now today, we're going to go something a bit different. We're going to go a bit away from audios now and more into modeling, okay? Obviously there are many other things that makes games amazing, but the key idea is if you want to make good characters in your game, you want to make sure that the model is pretty good, right? You want to learn how to model. But I know that a lot of us here are probably not great artists, and if you are, good for you. That's amazing. You're gonna have a great future, especially in the modeling side of games, in the character development. But most of us are not, which is pretty much a sad thing. It's a bummer. So because of that, there are many other alternatives. There's the Unity Asset Store, but on top of that, I can also teach you today on how to maybe create your own models and perhaps some tips and tricks that I've gathered from a few months of using Unity, perhaps a bit 1 year or something. I'm pretty sure I started Unity in 2019, so it's safe to say that it's been like 2 years since I've been using Unity. But from that, I mean, if you consider how many months that was and how many days it was every day that I worked on it, it's pretty clear that I think I've gathered some amount of data from using these models and Pro Builder especially, which is a cool tool. We'll go over that in the future. But today, I wanted to also teach you about some modeling tips, some tips that I can give you when you're trying to model your own characters, and perhaps Unity Asset Store is maybe not free, especially the products that you want to use from that place. Another thing we'll talk about today, which is very important, is the Unity particle system. All right, the particle system is, I think, the reason that really makes Unity also really amazing. Aside from the Unity asset store, prefabs, and its simplicity of UI, I think another big thing is the particle system. The way they integrated it, the amount of features they added onto it on top of that, it just makes a wow factor if you essentially look at it. And we will start introducing ourselves to these things today, and from that point on, we can move on to like just making the game more aesthetic and more to what you're intending your game to become, more to your team, more to your intention. As I said, intention to execution, so that whatever you make in the end, your execution should really match what you intended it to be from the beginning. All right, so without further ado, let's actually begin. We're going to start off with understanding some tips that I'll give you some tips and tricks about making your own models in Unity. So let me just, change the screen to main. We're gonna start off with modeling tips right away. All right, so the first thing I want to teach you guys are parent and children objects. We kind of got into this topic recently, but not really to the main idea, which is parent and children objects. What is more close to this is basically prefabs and instances, right? Prefab is what affects all instances in your environment, in your Unity environment. Instances are basically an individual, a unique object, basically, of a selected prefab in your environment. Remember, as I said, if any prefab you drag into your environment in Unity, it becomes its own unique thing, but it's relative and it's relied by the parent object itself. So we started learning about that rank difference, that the prefab is basically more higher in terms of ranking than instances. So if you change a prefab, it affects all the instances that you added in your game. Whereas just affecting one instance won't affect all of the other instances in your game. But again, there's another alternative to that, which I was talking about, overrides and all that things you could do, which is a really, really great tool, especially when you're making your own games. And sometimes you feel like when you're changing one specific instance, it kind of feels like that's the thing you want to have. That's that new thing that you want all of the things, all of the prefabs that you added into your game. All right, so we're gonna actually dive into more into this, more into understanding what parent and children objects are. So in that scenario, the parent was technically the prefab, and the children were basically the instances, but they're not necessarily overlapping to all instances, right? To the entire way. So today we're going to talk about more on the parent and children objects because it's a great idea to start that way. And ironically, it's actually about prefabs. So the key idea is it's just that children objects, they move relative to its parent object. So what I want to talk about today is when I go to Unity, and as you can see, I have made a lot of changes to my fellow character. And let me just open that. It's the rocket prefab. Now, if you didn't know this, you can actually go within the prefab itself. So you can make the changes two ways. One way is just basically go to the project panel, double click on it, and then you could start, individually changing each of these components inside of your prefab. Another way to do it, which I think is the highly recommended way, is basically going to the left, which is where your hierarchy panel is, where all the objects, or basically all the game objects that you added inside of your environment. Now, if you hover to the right, which is this prefab, as you know, how do you know what is a prefab? Well, it's this blue thing, right? Now, if you hover to this right arrow and you click on it, that's also another way, another approach to getting into this. All right, but I think if you also double click on it, I don't know if it does it, but in previous versions, if I'm not wrong, you can actually, let me just go up. You can basically change the way you lay out things here. So let's actually play the game. Let's see what's going on so far to see the updates that I did with the game itself. And I at least want to know what I changed because I did. So as you can see, there's actually one problem here. I'm turning the rocket relative to its bottommost position. Now, if you kind of know a bit about rockets, it starts from the center of mass. So you should rotate from the center of mass. So this is where I want to introduce the topic of parent and children objects. So you see this thing over here, this thing called rocket. You see this guy? You see this guy? Basically, this rocket thing is the parent object. And within this object are these, well, cubes that makes up as a whole the rocket parent object. So each of these individual cubes you see down here, or cylinders, or capsules, spheres, basically anything that's within the rocket that has been indented, they're basically the children of that rocket parent, of the rocket parent object. All right, so like let's say I want to move the rocket object, right? So I clicked on it and I moved it this way. Well, if you see, when I click on that parent object and I move to the right, all of these children objects are moving relative to the parent object. Basically, it's relying on the position of the parent object. So whatever the parent object does, the children objects do it. Just like Asian parents, I tell you to do something, and you have to do it because otherwise you just have to find a new family or basically become a failure. And I hope you guys don't become a failure because let's just not get there because we've seen that. Anyways, let's go back to the center. My point is, the thing is, if I move these individual children objects, it's not moving the entire thing. And it's because it is a children object. Other children don't listen to other children. They listen to their mommy or their daddy. They don't listen to their brothers or sisters. Okay, so that's a lesson you should learn from me. Not about that. I'm talking about parent and children objects. Anyways, but what I want to talk about is, as you saw, the rocket was turning from the bottom. And that is very sus, and it's not cool. Okay, that is the weirdest thing I've seen in games, and I swear to goodness, if you do that, you're a boomer. So please don't do that. So the way to do it is basically we can change the center of mass of the parent object. So as you see down here, let me just go over here. This arrow is on the bottom. So in other words, if I press E, which is the rotation tool, it's gonna move the entire parent object from the bottom. So we want to make sure we can do something that the parent object can go here, which is at the center of the mass. So the way we can do that is we can just basically select all of this, press the W tool, and basically make it go down. And I'll tell you why. So the reason why I did that was because when I go to the rocket, you can see that the center of mass is here now. Big brain. So if I'm actually going to press the E button, which is the rotation button, it's now rotating from the center of mass. Boom! Let's go. So I taught you something. It's pretty cool, hopefully. So let's actually go back to the game, and let's see if that's actually happening. So let me play the game. So if I turn left or right, you can see that the center of mass is moving left or right. So now you see that we did a big brain movement thing in our game. And the cool part is that it's actually going to affect all the levels we made. So if this prefab is also in other levels, in other words, in other scenes in the game, that rotation thing of the center of mass has also been applied to them, right? And obviously, in case we made any changes to this, we can always go to overrides and override to everything if we feel like this instance really does something that we should just, affect it on all other instances in your games. All right? So that's that about prefabs and basically the idea of parent and children objects. So basically, how do you know if something is a children object? Well, it's basically if it's either indented, as I said. Let's just go back. I don't want to teach you all that kind of stuff. Let's go back here. And if you see that indentation, that basically means that that is a children object of the parent. And the parent is the top one, the big one. You have to listen to that. And then if you don't, you have to find a new family. Or you're failure. You don't want to be a failure. We are all Asian and we know that. If you're failure, not good. No, no, no. So you basically understand what a children and a parent object is. A children object is within the parent object. And the parent object itself is just on top, which has all the children's with them. So just think of it like, imagine if you still don't get it. I really want to give one more example, not because it's funny. Maybe it's because it's funny. If you ever go on a highway, and I don't know if you guys seen it, there's a duck, like a line of ducks moving. The mother or the father is at first, and the ducks follow behind them. So you can think of it this way as well. The parent object is that big ducky in the front, the mommy ducky or the daddy ducky, and the thing behind them are the children duckies. All right, and these children duckies are the things that are within, it's the object that I showed you here that's within the parent ducky, which is the prefab itself. So that's one analogy that we can, maybe learn better or understand better about how parent and children objects work. So that's the key idea of, of a modeling tip, that you should understand the difference between parent and children objects, and actually doing that way, you could actually affect the center of mass. So let's say maybe in some other games, you want to change the rotation from the top, or perhaps from the bottom, or from the left or the right. You could change that, and it's pretty cool, okay? Now, I want to teach you some great ways for modeling a prefab. So these are some ways that I've actually done, some other cool methods or some approaches that I've done myself to make my game a bit better. Now, I can't just be biased and say my game's the best because that just makes me a narcissist. So I will just say that, hey, this is my idea, this is my approach. If you want to take it, just take it. But it's pretty cool, in my opinion. So first way is just basically list out the things that your main character needs to have. So for instance, for our rocket, we need a thrust. Without a thrust, there's no meaning of a rocket. It's just garbage. Okay, so let's not make your character garbage, but really give what it needs. Okay, so these are not the needs that like, hey, I just want this rocket to look aesthetic and that kind of stuff. No, that's waste of time. You want to make sure what your rocket needs, not want. There's a difference. Just because of what you want in your rocket doesn't mean it needs it. You know, like let's say I want a Tesla, but the Tesla is just your need. You could just make another car, right? You can get Tesla future and when you make a lot of money from your video games. Trust me, you will, if you are liking it. But that's a whole new story. But the same thing is, I don't want my rocket just to be a SpaceX rocket. We could do that in the future. We could add features, some new patches inside the game, and do that in the future. What we're talking about here is the things you need. Okay, a car needs an engine. Without an engine, the car won't move unless you have like a cycling thing, which is a waste of time. Okay, a car also needs tires unless it's flying, but then it's not a car, it's a plane. Same thing. Okay, so it's the same idea. After you listed out what the some things that you need, then you want to research. What I usually do is I go on the internet, maybe on Pinterest or maybe on Reddit. Don't spend too much time on Reddit, otherwise you'll be wasting 2 hours of your life, which is meaningful. Basically, the idea is you want to research on some similar things or ideas on the internet. So this is the time. This is the time when you actually go on the internet and perhaps get inspired by a Tesla or like on a Toyota car or a Supra. You might say, "Oh, is that a Supra?" Yeah, maybe it is. Okay, and you'll probably like it and you want to add it. Then what you could do is you could add or paste these images on a mood board. So I've been sharing some mood board links as resources. There's a video on that. So if you want to know where it is, it's in our YouTube videos. Or you could also add it on a Google Doc, just a simple Google sheet. If you don't have Google Doc, it's kind of weird because it's free. You could use Microsoft Word, but that's paid. So just use Google Doc. All right. But you want to try to find the things that most relate to your game's genre. So you probably don't want to add a Tesla in an ancient caveman game, because Teslas probably don't exist unless it's a time traveling game. Then that's a whole new story. But I'm trying to say that try to relate that car or that object mostly to the genre of your game. Otherwise, it's just confusing. But again, if that's something that you want your game to be, then that's a whole new story. But try to make it relate more to your story, not to the thing that you like, again. Okay? Then what you want to do is what I'm going to tell you to do today is basically, and I think you guys did, if I'm not wrong, just sketch at least 5 or 5 to 10, maybe not 10, but 5 is enough. 5 is at least 5 different designs of the model from all the ideas that you gathered around the internet, from that Google Doc sheet or from your mood board, and then figure out which one meets your requirement. Okay, so you could like rank them out. Which one, is something that's easier to make, or perhaps it looks better. So at the same time, it looks better, easier to make. And 3, it has all the things you want. Actually, that should be number 1. It should have all the things that you listed out in the beginning in part 1. And if it does meet your requirement, then congratulations, that is your model. And if it's not, keep on researching. And that's why game development is not easy. It takes a lot of research. And also, yeah, as I said, just find something that fits with you, something that fits with the most with you and your game. I don't want to say fits most with you because usually the real problem is that people say, that kind of looks like, it's like Tinder already. I don't want your game to be like Tinder and swipe all the maybe good things that you could have done with that car or that object, and just really take the things that you really like personally, right? Don't try to make meaning from your sketches. Your sketches don't really mean anything. If you look at it at 40 years, you're gonna be like, what's that garbage? Trust me, I've seen it myself. So just make sure that just sketch at least 5 different designs and just make sure it relates to what your game needs, not what you like or what you want. There's a difference. And yeah, and finally, you want to implement your selected model into your Unity game project, just like what we did. You want to just go implement it using, Unity's Pro Builder, which we learned in the future, or just simply make an empty game object, make a prefab of it, then make a parent object. Usually what people do, and you're wondering, how do I make a parent object from the beginning? You can just right click, create empty, right? So I can't really put that out. Usually this is just the parent object. You definitely get something from the beginning, and just start putting things inside of that parent object, and then from there you can go on. Okay, we'll just delete the game object since we don't need it. All right, so that's the idea. So just make sure you just implement it and then see whether it works or not. Otherwise, just do this thing again. It's really hard, and that's life. Life is hard. Anyways, let's talk about common modeling mistakes. These are some mistakes that really usually a lot of modelers make, especially also game developing modelers. All right, so the first thing is you want to make sure the parent object is at the location of the center of the prefab. So usually people don't do this, and as I said, you want to go back here, make sure the center of mass is really where it's supposed to be. Okay, and as I said, the way you could do that is just select all of the child objects and just move it around until it fits where the center of object is. It just takes a bit of nitpicky tests and tries, and whatever fits the most, you can select that and just move on. It's that simple. Good part is you don't have to save it, it automatically saves, but in the end, just for safety, just make sure you Control S or Command S if you're on Mac, and that's it. It's honestly one of the mistakes that you could easily fix. If it's not, as I said, that's the thing. So now let's talk about Unity particle system. This is the main reason why I made this meeting. Well, not the main, because last week I didn't do the GDC, so I wanted to promise that we do a meeting today. But that's a whole new story. I keep on saying that's a whole new story. So how many stories did I make? I don't know. 1,069 stories, I don't know. But my point is, today we want to talk about Unity's particle system, what it is, and how we will implement it in our own game, and perhaps your games in the future. So the first thing is we want to introduce ourselves to the Unity particle system component. So if we actually go back to our Unity project, if I right click on the hierarchy panel, I go on over effects, there's actually a particle system. Like I never knew, like you might have never known, unless you research a lot about particle system, then that's a whole new story. And good job. I like that mindset, Sigma grind set. But my point is, I want to tell you what a particle system is. If I click on a new particle system, don't think that it's not a game object. First of all, particle systems are a game object. How do I know it's a game object? Well, look at that, Dumbo. That is a game object, isn't it? And if I go over here, it becomes a prefab. So I can put more of that. Whoa! Right? Anyways, the bad part is I'm gonna oof this, but I can delete it later if I want. But the main idea, I don't know why I deleted it. Why did I delete it? Okay. So if you go here, this is a particle system. There's a pause. There's a restart button. Restart just makes it start again. There's a stop button, so it just completely stops because I'm kind of tripped by this, but it's fine. I'm gonna play it in the background. But there's so many things in this. This is why I love Unity. There's so many cool things you could do with it. You could keep on looping it. You could keep on, there's another thing you could do is play on awake, which basically means it will just automatically start playing once you play your scene. And honestly, there's more things you could do with this. You could, do the duration, which won't really matter if you're going to loop it. There are many things. We won't really go over these things really specifically. We'll probably get into this once we, once we start making our own games and maybe, do tests and trials and maybe even add some finalizations to our game, maybe post-processing. This is like one of the coolest ways that you could, add inside your game and then, post-process it and make it look even more better, or in other words, more realistic or better, at least for your game. But we won't really go into this like fully today. But one thing I want to tell you maybe today is like, maybe for now we won't do play on awake, and we probably won't do looping because we have a different reason for that. It's because we're going to implement it in the sense of explosions and success particles. So what I mean by success particles is whenever this object or our player, when it hits the the green board, which is basically helping us go to the other level, I'm actually going to do that right now because I want to make sure if I have added something or in the game. So if I, sorry. But yes, so the first thing is when I, when I touch something which I'm not supposed to touch, not girls, but like the obstacles, we want to get some explosion effect, okay? We want some cool, realistic boom effects. You could add whatever you want, but today I'll just teach you how to add that and maybe like some coding behind it. And then obviously when we hit this, green thing, we get a delay using invoke, but then we also want to add that particle, the success particle that you achieved this. You landed to this level. You want to give that player the sense of proudness, that feeling that, hey, I'm the best. Don't make it too narcissistic, but like my point is try to make it fun. Give them that kind of, sense of engagement that you made them like really happy from making them win a certain level. It just gives the player some happiness. Okay? A lot of players are really sad and depressed. So make these games for them. Like, like not to make them more depressed. Please don't. That's a serial killer kind of vibe. Please don't do that. But make them more happy in your slider game. And this is one cool and joyful way to do it, making some fun particles. It just gives a sense of good vibe inside of your game, okay? So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to understand how do particle system components work. Okay, so basically it's a component. It can be a component, but usually when you just put it in your environment, it's considered a game object. But usually it's considered as a component because of you basically just code stuff using that as a game object inside of another thing, usually using serialized field. So really, people just say it's a component because of that. But as I said, it's just really a game object. Um, and what we'll do is we'll use modules. Now, if you're wondering what modules are, this is a module over here. As you see over here, why do I keep on removing? Why do I keep on removing the particle system? This is considered a module, okay? And this is not just it. There's so many things, okay? There's collision, there's noise. There's so many things that you can do with this, okay? It's endless. Possibilities are endless. I'm just gonna stop this for now because it's tripping me. Um, but then yeah, each particle is not a game object. Well, it is. It kind of is. This is just many people say this to just nitpicky with you, okay? Like, but if you think of it, it technically is, but we don't consider it to be a game object because we usually don't just put it there in the environment and assume it's gonna do itself a thing. Particle system isn't like something you could just add components into it and you're done. This is why they don't say it's a game object, but you have to add it as a game object. It will feel like it. I'll just say it's a feel like it game object, but when you're gonna put inside when you're gonna put inside like some other game objects, then we usually not consider it really a game object. Okay, so that's the reason why people say it's not a game object it's because of this primary reason. But how things work is there's this thing called emitter. Emitter is where the thing starts, emitting in other words, blowing off or just bursting out, in other words, particles. Okay, so this is where like the thing starts, where they just burst out the particles, and each individual dots over here, as I showed you, if I play it, they're particles. So you actually cannot see an emitter, and that's why Unity is pretty cool. There are no emitters here. You can't see that there's like this plain box where it starts. No, it's supposed to be invisible. That's why you can't do that. Now, although it says, as I said, that you can add component, you can see that it's completely different than a normal game object. One thing is because it has modules, and this is really why people don't consider it to be a game object, and I highly don't recommend for you to also consider it to be a game object. I just said it was a game object to just give you that idea that don't think that just because it's not a game object, this will be in the hierarchy panel, right? This won't be in the hierarchy panel. It is in the hierarchy panel. So just try to think of it that it has some components, some ideas of a game object, but it's not entirely a game object, because what we'll do eventually is just drag this particle system inside of the rocket and do things from there. Okay, so what we're gonna do first is we're gonna go inside of this rocket and we're gonna add some particles into it. Okay, so if you don't know what particles I have, we have a rocket jet particle. So I think this is like, if I'm not wrong, if I just put it here, you can see that from the bottom over here, some particles are emitting. This is going to be the jet, the particle itself, where when we press the space bar, it's going to start doing that thing, all right? Another thing that we'll do is we're going to add this explosion effect. And that's basically when we, collide it with some other object, it's going to start this explosion effect. Then we have the success particle effect. So let me just play that again. Okay, you can see that a problem happened over there. You can just reset it. And if I play it now, you can see that it's gonna start playing that from the center of the object. Okay, but the idea is the reason why I added it inside of this parent object, and specifically why inside of the prefab, it's because I don't want to, first of all, we're gonna import this. In other words, we're gonna add this inside of this rocket object, so we can get a component of that, right, easily. And second, I don't want to mess it up over here with other things, because usually what happens is once you start putting things outside, bugs can happen, and it will start playing when you're not supposed to be playing it. So it's always better to have it inside of a prefab, especially inside of a parent object, to prevent those issues, because Unity it's just unpredictable mostly. Okay, so just keep that in mind. All right, so let's just go back into the slides in case I'm forgetting something. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna use this thing called particle system.play. Particle system itself is a component, so we can use it as other things we did. We can instantiate an object via code, just like what we did for audio source, right? Audio source is a component itself, and we made an object of that class we made an instance of that class, considering it to be an object. And what we did, we just used get component to get the component of the audio source, and essentially going from there. All right, so what we can do, if I'm not wrong, is, let me just check. let me just go here. Oops, sorry. If you actually add, and I don't know if they have this, they have a particle system, if I'm not wrong. And you can see that it automatically adds whatever you want. So and you might be asking, like, what is this pink thing? And I actually want to talk about it. What is that pink thing? Uh, a lot of people, including Blender artists, if you're a Blender artist as well, you might want to know this and try to figure out why that pink thing happens if you're still confused about it. And that's a good segue because we're going to talk about it right now. The reason why it happens is because when we haven't added some sort of material or some texture onto some object, Unity will default that object, that color of the object, to pink. Why pink? We don't know, but it's pink. So the thing is, they added that color to just give you that indicator that this thing doesn't have an object. So that could be a possible reason behind why they made it pink, because it's a bright color and it kind of just lets the person automatically detect, like as a natural detection, that this is a problem, and then they could figure it out. Unless you're colorblind, then I really apologize, but I think there should be other alternatives to that as well, so don't worry. But yeah, if it's not, then so what did I say if it's not? Hold on, my brain is hurting. If it's not, try moving the children objects as needed until the I don't know why I added it there. Just forget that side, that part of the thing. But basically, the idea is, how do we fix this, right? How do we fix this kind of a problem? Basically, what we do is we have to go to the renderer module, and then we want to add a material for the particle system. So if you see over here, if you go to the renderer module, so each of these things, as I said, it's basically a module. Now, this thing doesn't have a material, and that is indeed a problem. So then what we do is we would just want to add the material that we found out for that object. Usually all particle systems, especially in the asset store, they give you materials. So what you want to do is you want to drag that inside of the material section or component, and then it should fix that problem. But for us, I think we don't need a particle system because we're going to use serialized field, if I'm not wrong. So that shouldn't be a problem. All right. So what we're going to do is we're also going to add some boosters, side boosters, and also the main booster. And we want to add them into your prefab, so we create some variables for each, right? So what I'm going to do today is, maybe we're not going to do the left and right boosters. We can do that maybe in the next class. But what we want to do today is we definitely want to do the 1, explosion kind of effect, 2, the success particle effect, and 3, the main booster effect. So then what I might make you do is, maybe like at your own time, you could maybe work it out for your right and left boosters, because I've taught you all the necessary things. And if you're still confused about it, you can always, drop by on the Unity chat on Discord and basically ask from there. And if you're on YouTube, you can always use, obviously, the comment section, right? So let's go back to our rocket thing, and let's open, I think it's the collision handler script. So if you kind of think of it, you might wonder, why does success and failure, why both of these things don't have this get component? Well, it's because that's also the one reason why I highly recommend using serialized field. You don't have to refer to it. Unity automatically realizes what it is based on what you drag into that, right? So what we're going to do is the same thing. We're going to basically take this, Command C, Command V. This is always the biggest tip that I give to you all. Save your time. Time is really sensitive, really important. Sigma grind set. An advice from a kid. I'm not a kid. Anyways, particle system. What we're going to do is we're going to do the same thing we did for audio clip, except for particle system. Particle system. All right. All right. And I think we want to change success and failure to something else. 1, because we've already used that for another variable. So we cannot have 2 variables having the same name. Yep. All right. So what we can do is we can just do success particle. We could just call it that. And maybe failure. You can do a failure particle. All right. I'm going to get canceled for just saying that. Maybe what we can do, maybe a better word, is crash particle. Not because I was rude there, but because I think it makes more sense. Just saying failure particle, I was off there because it doesn't make sense fully. But crash particle is going to give an indication that, oh, yeah, we're using it for, specifically using it for, like, explosion effects. So let's go back over to our code. All right, give it a moment. All right, so let's go back. Let's go back to the rock. I really apologize for doing that. Let's go to the failure part. I don't know why it still says. Oh yeah, sorry, I read it wrong. So the success particle, crash particle. So let's just drag our success particle to the success particle, and a failure particle. So sorry, it's a crash particle. So explosion particle to the crash particle. So that basically, and this is really important, please guys, when you start initializing serialized field, save it, go back to the code, and drag it. Because usually what happened, you'll be like, oh, why is it not showing up? Well, listen, one-to-one kind of advice. You forgot to do that. So that's usually the main issue, and I realized it after many classes, and I really apologize for extending the class for just a long time because I forgot the fact that, I dragged these things inside of where they're supposed to be, which are these components. I had to serialize them. All right, so that's just one downside of serialized field. It's just that, it's really easy to do it in code, but then you tend to forget adding the exterior things inside of this component because then Unity won't realize, what are you trying to refer to, So just make sure you keep on doing this and make sure they're right, okay? So don't put explosion into success and don't put success in crash, otherwise things will get weird from there. So we have that. This is good. So now we can actually go to our code. And we might want to understand where we want to put different things where. Okay? So when we, like, let's say we go to this thing called start destroy, right? This is actually where, like, we default and when we hit something, the start destroy method happens. But we made a comment, didn't we? So now we know where to add this. So what we could do is we could actually do whatever we learned from whatever. We can go back to this and we can see that I already gave an indicator that we need to get a particle system reference and just do dot play. Dot play just basically means just play it, when I tell you to. But one more thing before we do anything, we need to go to each of these things individually, turn off looping, and turn off auto random seed. Wait, what? Auto random seed should be on. Just turn off play on awake, okay? And turn off looping for this, and then turn off play on awake, and just make sure it's it's for all of them. Just make sure it's done for all of these different things. Now let's go back to our Visual Studio Code. All right, and what we can do is we can refer to our particle, and what we can do for the crash sequence. And I'm just looking at my code from my other game, so I don't, do something bad. So what we can do is just get the crash particle dot play. All right, let's go to the other thing, and let's do the same thing. Now I think we call it success particle dot play. So a lot of questions usually happen that people would be asking me, why is it success particle? And please don't open Steam. Please don't open Steam. No, please don't open Steam. Oh, goodness. No, please don't open Steam. Okay, great. And people usually ask me, why is it not the, the success particle explosion? Why don't we use this as the reference instead of this? Well, the thing is, first of all, we use success particle as a referencing to that particle, okay, as a variable referencing that particle. So basically, it's storing the location, or in other words, a memory address, which is more in-depth kind of thing, of that particle in the game. All right, but this is actually just simplifying your life. You don't have to, like, do any other thing. And I don't think there's any other way other than, doing get component and then this. But honestly, this is the more easier way to do it. Unity has done it for us thanks to model behavior, right? So the reason why we use success particle is because, one, it's a variable just easily referencing that kind of particle. So we can just do success particle dot, and it will automatically get all the methods we get for this particle system class. All right. So in other words, this is a good way to understand how serialized field works. Let me just close Steam. All right. And how it works is just basically we're getting the class. So it's storing the class particle system, which has all that set of methods, but we're also getting the serialized field, basically an object, all right? Or in other words, like something from the environment that is appropriately part of this class. It's approved by this class. So in other words, the particle that we added into this, it is supported by the particle system class. It's actually, in other words, relying on it. So then we could use this explosive particle. So if we go back to our rocket, we can use essentially that success particle, which is this, inside of this, because success particle is part of that particle system class. They're using methods from that particle system class to be able to show a render of your particle in the environment. And that is essentially how particle system work. It's really cool, actually, if you think of it. All right, so that's really essentially the reason why we use success particle instead of that other name of your particle that's in their game. It's just a way of simplifying your life. All right, so if you think of it, I think that's really it if you think of it. So let's just go back to the game and see whether this works or not. All right, so let's click on play and let's play the game. You can see that the explosion particle happened and there was a delay, and there we go. That's how it works. Now let's actually try it for the success particle. You can see it's working. And also, as I said, we cannot use our keyboard when we are successfully winning. Same thing for explosion. So let's try on the other levels to see whether this has been implemented over there as well. So let's just hit that thing. And you can see it's happening. So voila, it's actually working. And let's try again for trying to show you my gaming skills, but it's not working. Where did my rocket go? Okay. All right. Let's see if it works for the success. And yeah, it works. So we've essentially done it, and it works really well for the explosion and success. But now, how about the jet? How about this thing that, when we go inside of this rocket, how about the jet particle? All right, and I think I'm going to show you the loop part of it, just to show you how it works, but I can turn it off later. Basically, how do we make that happen? What if you're, once we're thrusting in the air? And the real question is, how do we thrust in the air? I think I already, gave you the answer, but the answer is spacebar, right? Whenever we press the spacebar in the game, on a keyboard, that is allowing the rocket to thrust, right? So we could use, and now the second question is, which script is essentially responsible for moving your particle? Or not your particle, but your rocket. It's the movement script, right? So let's actually go back to our code and open movement.cs. All right. So what we're going to do now is we're going to reference the particle system of the jet. Okay, so now what we're going to do, and to save our time, I'm just going to serialize field this. I'm just going to, copy and paste it. And instead of float, it's going to be particle system. All right. And we don't need to have a float. This is different. But we could call it main engine particle. We don't want to call it particle system. Otherwise, it's very long and you want to simplify your word a lot, right? So then what we could do, there's another trick to this. You can do Shift Alt down arrow. So I'm going to do it 2 more times. I'm just going to copy that exact code this twice. And I'm just going to do this for you like right now. You could do this later at your own time. This is going to be your own assignment. Left engine particle and right engine particle. There you go. So we want to do it for like each of the particles. So what I'm going to do is like if I go back to the game, if it load, let it load. Yeah, so if I'm going to press the space bar, it's going to emit. So let me just turn this thing around so I could show you properly. It's going to emit from here. If I'm going to turn left, it's going to emit from here. And if I'm going to turn right, it's going to emit from here. But there's another trick there. Just because I turn left, you can't just emit this, right? It's going to have to be the other side if you want to follow the physics laws. In your game, you can also make it not follow physics laws, but then I'm not going to like it. I don't think a lot of people will like it because they live in a physics world, not in an unrealistic world. But if you have a cool way to do it, just do it. But that's my point. So what are we going to do today in like today's class? We're going to find a way, essentially, on how to use this main engine particle. Now, remember, one thing that I forgot to do is basically put that inside of our script. So it's actually over here. So we want to make sure we put that inside of our game. So what we want to do first, I want to go to particles. And I'm going to take the side thrust, and I don't know if there's side thrust particles. I think I only have one. But what I can do is I can just add it down here, and you can see that there's a side thrust particle right over there. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go over here to transform, just reset its. I shouldn't have done that. I can just click on this and just put it there. and play it to see whether it works or not. I'm gonna bring it down a bit more. So first thing that I want to do is just, put these particles at the right place. Right. Now you might be wondering, how do I do the other way? So just honestly, can we control D? Yeah, we can control D here. And just basically move it to the others. Oops, sorry. Nope. Nope. Yeah. And I think it's the y-axis that's responsible for this. No, it's not. I think it's the x, maybe. Yeah, it's the x. So the trick to this is I can just do negative or not. I'm just probably gonna have to, I don't know. Let's see how it's gonna happen. I think it's gonna, what? I am very confused right now. What is this? Or I can just, manually do it because it's better, I guess. uh, yeah, so once you have, selected your positions for both of them, you get the side thruster particles, right? Now we can go back to the main rocket and go to the code and just drag all the rocket jet particles. So this one is that. Then we want to just make sure, okay, so this is the right one. So make sure you choose the correct ones, the appropriate ones for each different particles so that you don't throw off your entire code with something wrong, right? So then we already added this thing. So that's actually good. We added it in our code, so we shouldn't have any problems in the future in our game. And also make sure that these things are disabled, like looping for both of them. We can work on that in the future or in your own assignment, which I will do for you guys, okay? And now what we're gonna do is we want to find out where we could actually implement this thing. Okay, we got everything. We got everything for us. But now we want to figure out, what can we do to basically start this thing, to basically play it. Now, similar to this, the idea was, if you look at this code over here, this is for the audio. And this audio is for the jet audio. So basically the reason why, remember, why I did exclamation mark audio source is playing, and then I play it only when that's true, it's because I don't want the game to be overlapping, so many audios at once. Usually it's a bug. It's one of the most common bugs that happens with audio. And the thing is, maybe sometimes when you crash or sometimes when you go to the success plays and then you keep on pressing it at once, it starts overlapping the sound, okay? And I'm pretty sure all of us, we don't just hold the spacebar key once and just play around the game. No, we press it and then we release it, then press it and release it. That's the point of a rocket because it has a thruster. We're just boosting the rocket based on our thrusters, right? So the idea was whenever you just keep on pressing it, it's going to overlap the sound. So in order to prevent that problem, we did if exclamation audio source is playing. So in other words, exclamation mark basically means not. So in other words, if audio source is playing, that would mean without the exclamation mark, it is playing. But if not audio source is playing, it's just saying that if no audio source is playing, so if none of these audio that you just played, it's playing in the background, then you should only play. So we should do the same thing for our rocket as well, right? For our rocket particle. So we can just basically copy and paste the code. And basically the idea is just change audio source to main engine. All right. I think that's that, if I'm not wrong. So if I go back to my code, it's going to take a time to load. All right. Let's go back to the game. And let's see whether it's working or not. This is the time when we play test. And you can see very slightly, let me just bring it down. You can see like a rocket coming out, right? But that's not what we want, okay? So let's go back to the thing. And let's go to the rocket particle. And let's increase the duration, maybe. Let's play it. Maybe a 0.10 was good. I don't know. I'll maybe make it 0.15. Or 0.25. So this is actually the time where you want to play test whether it's working or not. Maybe 0.30. And let's play it. Yeah, that looks pretty decent. I'm going to move it a bit down. All right, let's see if that works. And if I go to the emission, and you can see that if I keep on looping it, let's just loop it and play it. All right, if I keep on looping it and I just increase the rate over time, you can see that more particles are coming over time. Now, the thing is, the more realistic your particle is, the more textures it has, like 4K textures, and you increase the rate over time, that will make your GPU process more. Okay, so especially for games that you, at least your leading target. If your leading platform target are for computers that can run realistic games that require RTX, I recommend to not increase this to an enormous amount. Okay, I recommend that you don't, because what will happen is problems can happen, and I don't want you guys to have a lot of problems. I don't want your game to be very laggy if your computer doesn't have a RTX kind of GPU. If it does, congrats. And I know some of you in this call do, and I really appreciate that. And I'm jealous. I'm not jealous. Did I just say I'm jealous? I'm not jealous. Sorry. Uh, okay. Let's see. So I think for now, I think we can do that, but we could also like change the arc length that I said, but I don't think this will do a lot. You could do what you want with it. Like for example, I could change the angle so I could make it more spread. So I think this works for me because usually like, if I have more spread inside of the rocket, that just makes it a bit better. And also that, there's a cone over there, right? There's two things to the side of it. So that's what we want. It's kind of what we want. So that's pretty good. I'm just gonna turn off the loop. Let's go back to the game. Let's play it, and let's see if it actually works or not. So yeah, that is something I like. I actually like that. It's kind of doing, it's cool. And you can see the explosion still happens. So you can see that it's working completely fine. And you can see that when I press, like near the environment, it's giving that realistic look. And when I turn around, it's turning the particles as well. And that's why I appreciate Unity's particle system. Now, let's go to the other level to see whether this change has also been applied over there as well. So, I wish that there was a playtester who could just do this for me, like, and we're gonna get into that. We're gonna talk about cheat debug keys. It's gonna be pretty cool. Now, let's just see whether, I think it's there. So if I'm not wrong, you could see that. I don't think it is. So I think what we need to do, we need to go inside of this rocket prefab, um, and basically click on overrides and click on apply all. So it's going to apply to all the levels in your game. All right. So let's go to level. So let's first save this. Let's go to our scenes. Let's go to level 2. Make sure you override even particles. Otherwise, if you don't, that changes are not applied to other instances in your scene. All right. So now you can see that it looks a bit similar to the level 1. Maybe I think it's because I turned off looping. That could be the reason. Don't blame me. That could have been the reason. Yeah, that could have been the reason. Let's see if it works now. Yeah, no, it's not. Okay, I'm just gonna leave it. Sorry, where is it? Yeah. So let's actually play the game again. I don't know what I'm doing right now. Yeah, so it looks pretty good. Let's see if I have anything else to add. Um, I don't think we do. I think it looks good so far. Whoa, sorry. I think that's it. I don't know. Usually the rocket jet. Oh, sorry. Oof. Sorry about that. Explosion particle seems fine, but the thing is, usually what happens is you could change the duration of it and make it longer until you press the space bar. So it should be playing until it presses the thing. Is it because its trigger is not enabled? It might not be of that. But the idea is we finally were able to, press the spacebar and play the rocket's engine once we're doing that, right? And that is the most important part, especially when we're playing with particles. So I think that's that, if I'm not wrong. Okay, so in today's class, we talked a lot about particle system, and especially modeling tips. Okay, you're gonna be making your own characters. I think at this point, I don't know if I have assigned you this thing, but maybe this week, maybe if you guys haven't done it, you're gonna have to design your own rocket and then implement it inside of Unity using the techniques that I taught you, like making your own empty object and then making a prefab out of it, and making children objects within that parent object using that technique. Okay, and then actually it's going to be beneficial because maybe in the future, let's say you wanted to add something more interesting or remove something. It's going to be easier that way because if you have a children object and a parent object, that's going to be the easiest approach to fixing things, okay? And then we talk about particles. As I said, we had a success particle, explosion particles. You kind of gave the game itself a bit more, realistic-ish feeling because it's a 3D game after all, not a 2D game, even though it's kind of like a 2D game, but we gave like RTX kind of feeling. And I know we all don't have RTX, which is kind of sad. Uh, so yeah. But then we also like added jet particles, right? So when you press the space bar, you could get that jet particle coming out of the rocket itself only when you press the space bar, so it's conditioned using coding. So you should appreciate the mono behavior, that class, that cool thing that Unity gave to us to help us simplify the code and letting everyone who just doesn't know a lot about coding make their lives easier and finding solutions to that. Okay, so I'm gonna list out the assignments pretty soon on the GDC Discord. So don't worry about that. But yes, but the main thing you want to do this week is definitely figure out a way where you could do it for the right engine particle and for the left engine particle. So whenever you rotate left, the right engine particle should, come up. And whenever you rotate right, the left engine particle should start emitting, right? So the same thing for right and left engine particles. I will share out these particles online on Discord so you could get them really easily. But that's really that from there. It's still going to be assigned on, the assignments channel tab on the Discord thing. So really, yeah, that's really it for today's meeting. Thank you guys for joining, and I'll catch you later next week. So thanks, guys, and stay creative. Peace.